The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when Ambassador Crystal of the Vethani Collective finished reading the human report. His 4 eyes blinked in different patterns, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. Around the circular room, representatives from 37 different civilizations shifted in their seats, each processing what they had just heard in their own way. "This cannot be accurate," said High Delegate Morvesh, her crystalline form vibrating with disbelief. "The translation must be flawed." "I assure you the translation is perfect," replied the human ambassador, Sarah Chen. She stood at the center of the chamber, her small frame looking almost comical next to the massive alien beings around her. But her voice was steady and her eyes held no fear. The incident happened exactly as described. Crystal held up the datapad again, his clawed hand trembling slightly. "Let me understand this correctly. A human ship, the cargo vessel named Morning Star, responded to a distress signal from a Threxian mining station. There was a reactor breach. The station was going to explode, and your crew did not simply evacuate." "No," Sarah said, "they did not. The report says that Captain Marcus Webb and 6 members of his crew entered the station to rescue the trapped workers, that they knew the reactor would breach in less than 20 minutes, that they had never met these Threxians before, that they had no trade agreements, no treaties, no prior contact with this mining operation." "That is correct. And 3 of them died." Crystal's voice dropped to barely a whisper. 3 humans died saving strangers they had never met, beings from a species they had only learned about 6 months ago. Sarah nodded. Engineer Thomas Park, Medical Officer Diana Santos, and Cargo Specialist James Wright. They knew the risks. They went anyway. And because they did, 43 Threxian miners are alive today. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives began speaking over each other in dozens of languages. The universal translators struggled to keep up with the flood of questions, demands for clarification, and expressions of disbelief. High Delegate Morvesh raised one of her crystalline appendages, and the room gradually quieted. "Ambassador Chen, please help us understand. In our cultures, sacrifice of this magnitude is reserved for protecting one's own genetic line, one's own clan or hive. It is a biological imperative. What biological imperative drove these humans to die for genetic strangers, for members of an entirely different species?" Sarah took a deep breath. She had known this moment would come eventually. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 2 years ago, and there was still so much that other species did not understand about them. "With respect, High Delegate, it was not a biological imperative. It was a choice, a moral choice." "But why?" demanded Representative Zeth from the Korathi Empire. His insected mandibles clicked with frustration. What did they gain? What reward was promised? What debt were they repaying? Nothing, no reward, no debt. They simply saw beings in danger and chose to help. "That is not logical," Zeth insisted. "Resources are finite. Lives are finite. To expend your finite existence for no return is the height of irrationality." Sarah smiled slightly. "Perhaps, but we do not always operate on logic alone. We have something we call empathy. We feel the suffering of others, even strangers, and we are driven to ease that suffering." "We have studied your species," said Morvesh carefully. "We know of your empathy, but empathy among your kind evolved to strengthen social bonds within your tribes. It was meant for those you know, those who might one day return the favor." "That is how it started, yes, but we have grown beyond that." Sarah looked around the chamber at the dozens of alien faces watching her. "Humans have spent thousands of years expanding our circle of moral concern. First it was just our family, then our tribe, then our nation, then our entire species. And now, as we reach the stars, it includes you as well." "You cannot expect us to believe that every human would do this," Crystal said. "No, not every human. We have our cowards and our selfish ones just as every species does. But what Captain Webb and his crew did, In our culture, we do not call it heroism. We call it basic human decency. The silence that followed was profound. Basic. They called sacrificing their lives for strangers basic. In the back of the chamber, a young Threxian named Vexnar listened intently. He had been sent as part of his government's observation team, too junior to speak, but old enough to understand the significance of what was happening. His father had been one of the 43 miners saved by the Morning Star crew. He had come here wanting to understand why 3 beings had died so his father could live. Now, he was beginning to realize that the answer was simpler and more terrifying than he had imagined. They did it because they thought it was the right thing to do. They did it because the alternative, walking away while others died, was unthinkable to them. They did it because that is simply who humans are. Vexnar made a decision in that moment. He would learn more about these strange beings. He would study their history, their culture, their philosophy. And perhaps, if he was brave enough, he would try to understand how they had evolved to be this way. Because if humans called dying for strangers basic decency, then the galaxy had just become a very different place. 3 months after the Galactic Council meeting, Vexnar found himself aboard the human space station New Hope. It orbited a small moon on the edge of human territory, serving as a trading post and cultural exchange center. He had applied for a research position studying human sociology, and to his surprise, his application had been accepted within days. The station was unlike anything he had experienced before. Threxian stations were efficient, orderly, with every space serving a defined purpose. New Hope was chaos. Humans and aliens moved through the corridors in seemingly random patterns. Music played from somewhere. There were plants growing in containers along the walls, and everywhere there was noise. Humans never seemed to stop talking. His guide was a young human woman named Maya Tors, an anthropologist who had been assigned to help him adjust. She was shorter than most humans he had seen, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to be constantly smiling. "I know it must be overwhelming," she said as they walked through the main corridor. "Human stations are designed for living, not just working. We like to make them feel like home." "Your definition of home appears to include significant inefficiency," Vexnar observed. Maya laughed. It was a strange sound, one that the translators always struggled with. "Probably, but efficiency is not everything. Sometimes the inefficient things are what make life worth living." They passed a small alcove where a group of children were sitting in a circle. A human adult was reading to them from a physical book. Physical books, Vexnar knew, had been obsolete among humans for centuries, but they still made them for children. "What is the purpose of that gathering?" he asked. "Story time," Maya said. "Mrs. Chen reads to the station's children every afternoon. It helps them learn and it helps build community." "Mrs. Chen, is she related to Ambassador Chen?" "No, just a coincidence. Chen is a common name." Maya paused at a junction. "Actually, that's not entirely true. She's not related by blood, but Ambassador Chen sponsors Mrs. Chen's grandchildren's education. They met during the ambassador's last visit here." "Sponsors? I do not understand." "It means she pays for their schooling. Mrs. Chen is a widow. Her husband died in a mining accident years ago, and she does not have much money. Ambassador Chen heard about it and offered to help." "What does she receive in return?" Maya smiled that strange smile again. "Nothing. Mrs. Chen sends her updates about the children sometimes. Photos, stories about their achievements, that is all." Vexnar felt that same confusion he had experienced in the council chamber. Why would someone of the ambassador's status use her resources to help a stranger's family? "Because she can," Maya said simply. "Because she has more than she needs and Mrs. Chen has less. Because watching those children grow and succeed brings her joy. Is that not reason enough?" It was not reason enough, not by any logical measure Vexnar knew. but he was beginning to suspect that humans operated by a different kind of logic. Over the following weeks, Vexnar observed countless examples of what humans called helping each other. A mechanic spent his rest period repairing a stranger's personal transport for free. A cook always made extra food to share with anyone who looked hungry. When a family's living quarters flooded due to a pipe malfunction, 7 other families immediately offered to house them until repairs were complete. None of these acts involved formal exchanges. No contracts were signed, no debts recorded, no obligations legally binding. When Vexnar asked why, the humans always seemed puzzled by the question. "Why would I need a contract to help my neighbor?" one man asked, genuinely confused. "They needed help, I could help, that is all there is to it." "But what if they never repay you?" "Then they do not repay me. I did not help them to be repaid. I helped them because they needed it." Vexnar began to compile his observations into a research paper. The more data he gathered, the more extraordinary it seemed. Humans had somehow built an entire civilization on the foundation of voluntary mutual aid. Not enforced cooperation, not genetic obligation, but simple choice. One evening, he was working late in his assigned quarters when the station's emergency alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. A calm voice announced that there was a fire in the hydroponics section. Vexnar followed emergency protocol and moved toward the designated assembly area. But as he walked, he noticed something strange. Humans were not all moving in the same direction. Some were heading toward the fire, not away from it. He stopped a man who was carrying a fire suppression unit. "Where are you going?" "To help," the man said as if it were obvious. "The emergency teams are already there, but they might need extra hands." "But you are not trained in firefighting." "No, but I can carry equipment. I can help evacuate people. I can do something." The man did not wait for a response. He ran toward the danger. Vexnar stood frozen for a moment. Then, without fully understanding why, he turned and followed. The hydroponics section was filled with smoke when he arrived. Trained emergency personnel were already fighting the blaze, but there were also dozens of ordinary station residents helping in whatever way they could. Some carried water containers. Others led dazed workers to safety. A group was forming a chain to pass equipment from hand to hand. Maya appeared beside him, her face covered in soot. "Vexnar, are you okay?" "I came to help," he heard himself say. She smiled through the smoke. "Then come on, we need to get the last workers out of Section 4. Vexnar followed her into the smoke. His hearts were pounding with fear. His every instinct told him to flee. But somewhere in his mind, a new voice was speaking. It said that there were beings in danger. It said that he could help. It said that this was simply what you did. That night, working alongside humans and aliens alike to save a burning space station, Vexnar began to understand what basic human decency really meant. It was not about logic or return on investment. It was about the simple, profound act of choosing to care. The Galactic Council reconvened 6 months after Vexnar's arrival on New Hope. This time, the topic was not a single incident but a growing pattern that could no longer be ignored. Human behavior across dozens of star systems was causing what the Council termed a crisis of understanding. Representative Zeth was the first to present his evidence. Holographic displays filled the chamber with images and data streams as he spoke. In the Korathi Empire, we have observed 27 separate incidents of humans intervening in emergencies that did not concern them. A human merchant ship diverted from its profitable trade route to rescue a Vethani cargo vessel that had lost propulsion. A human medical team volunteered to treat victims of the Grelax plague, despite having no immunity to the disease. 4 of them died. A human construction crew rebuilt a Threxian colony's water purification system after an earthquake, refusing any payment. He paused, his mandibles clicking with agitation. In each case, we have found no evidence of hidden motives, no secret agreements, no long-term strategic benefit to humanity. They simply helped. High Delegate Morvesh added her own observations. The Crystalline Collective has similar reports. Humans have established what they call volunteer networks across our shared border regions. These are ordinary citizens who spend their personal time and resources helping beings of other species. They teach children, repair equipment, distribute food to those in need. They ask nothing in return. This is destabilizing, declared Ambassador Crystal. Our economic models do not account for this behavior. Our citizens are asking why aliens would help them for free. They are beginning to question the foundations of our exchange-based society. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the chamber once again. She had been expecting this discussion for some time. "I understand your concerns," she said, "but I must ask, are your citizens being harmed by this help?" "That is not the point," Zeth protested. "The point is that we do not understand it. Behavior that cannot be understood cannot be predicted. Behavior that cannot be predicted is dangerous." Is helping others truly dangerous? It is when we do not understand why. The Korathi representative's agitation was clear. For thousands of years, our civilizations have operated on a simple principle. Resources are exchanged for resources, services for services. This creates predictability, stability, order. Your species disrupts all of this. Sarah nodded slowly. "I think I understand the source of your confusion. You see our actions as transactions without payment, but we do not see them as transactions at all." "Then what are they?" "They are expressions of who we are. When a human helps a stranger, they are not calculating potential returns. They are acting according to their values. They believe that reducing suffering is good. They believe that helping others is meaningful. They believe that a universe where beings care for each other is better than one where they do not." From his seat in the observation area, Vexnar watched the exchange with new eyes. He had spent 6 months living among humans now. He had seen their kindness up close, had experienced it himself, and he had begun to understand something that he needed to share. He stood up. This was highly irregular. Junior observers were not meant to speak in council sessions, but he could not remain silent. "If I may address the council." High Delegate Morvesh looked surprised, but gestured for him to continue. "My name is Vexnar. My father was one of the miners saved by the Morning Star crew. For the past 6 months, I have lived on human station New Hope, studying their culture, and I have come to understand something important." He took a deep breath. "We have been asking the wrong question. We keep asking why humans help strangers, but the question we should be asking is why we do not." The chamber fell silent. "We pride ourselves on our logic, our efficiency, our rationality. But is it truly logical to let others suffer when we could help? Is it efficient to allow problems to grow when they could be solved? Is it rational to build a galaxy where everyone looks out only for themselves?" Representative Zeth's mandibles clicked sharply. "You speak as if you have become one of them." "No, I speak as someone who has learned from them. During my time on New Hope there was a fire, a dangerous situation, and do you know what I did? I ran toward it. Not because I was obligated to, not because I expected a reward, but because people needed help and I could provide it. And in that moment I felt something I had never felt before. I felt connected, not to my clan or my species, but to every being around me. Human, Threxian, Vethani, it did not matter. We were all just people trying to help each other survive." Ambassador Chen was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Pride, perhaps, or hope. "The humans have a concept," Vexnar continued. "They call it the better angels of our nature. It refers to the capacity within every thinking being to choose compassion over indifference, generosity over selfishness, connection over isolation. They believe this capacity exists in all of us." "A pleasant philosophy," Morvesh said, But philosophies do not change biology. No, but choices do. The humans chose to expand their circle of moral concern. Generation by generation, they chose to see more beings as worthy of their care. And now that choice has brought them to the stars, where they are choosing to include us. The question is not whether we can make the same choice. The question is whether we have the courage to try. Vexnar sat back down. His hearts were pounding. He had just challenged the fundamental assumptions of every major civilization in the galaxy. He had essentially suggested that they were all morally inferior to a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. But he had also told the truth, and sometimes the truth was the most dangerous thing you could share. The council chamber erupted into heated debate. Some delegates demanded that Vexnar be removed for his impertinence. Others called for more study of human behavior. A few, very quietly, began to wonder if the young Threxian might have a point. Ambassador Chen caught his eye across the room and gave him a small nod. It was enough. Whatever happened next, he had spoken his truth, and sometimes that was all you could do. The true test came 2 years later, when the Void Plague struck the Korathi homeworld. It began in a remote mining settlement and spread with terrifying speed. The Korathi immune system, evolved over millions of years to combat their world's native pathogens, had no defense against this alien disease. Within weeks, millions were infected. Within months, the death toll reached the hundreds of millions. The Korathi Empire issued a desperate plea to the Galactic Council for assistance. They offered everything they had: trade concessions, territory, ancient technologies. They would give anything if only someone could help. The responses from the other major powers were calculated and careful. The Vethani Collective offered medical supplies at a fair market price. The Crystalline Collective proposed a research partnership with clearly defined intellectual property agreements. The Threxian Federation expressed sympathy, but noted that sending their own citizens into a plague zone would be an unacceptable risk. Then the humans responded. Within days of the plea being issued, human ships began arriving in Korathi space. Medical vessels, cargo ships loaded with supplies, transport ships carrying volunteer doctors and nurses and researchers. They came by the hundreds, then by the thousands. Representative Zeth, now leading his government's emergency response, met the first human delegation personally. He still did not understand these strange beings, but he had watched them carefully over the past 2 years. He knew that their help would come without strings attached. "You did not need to come," he said to the human commander, a gray-haired woman named Admiral Patricia Okonkwo. "We have nothing to offer you. Our economy is collapsing. We may have nothing left even if we survive this plague." The Admiral smiled gently. "We did not come for payment, Representative. We came because you needed help." "But why? Your people will die here. This plague shows no mercy. Your doctors have no immunity." "They know. They volunteered anyway." Zeth's mandibles clicked slowly, processing this information. "In my culture, we have always believed that the measure of a civilization is its technological advancement, its military strength, its accumulated wealth. By those measures, humanity is young and weak." "Perhaps those are not the right measures," Okonkwo suggested. "Perhaps not. Perhaps the true measure of a civilization is how it treats those who can give nothing in return." The human medical teams set up field hospitals across the Korathi homeworld. They worked alongside Korathi doctors, sharing knowledge freely, learning and adapting as they went. Many fell ill. Some died, but more volunteers arrived to take their places. Vexnar came with one of the later waves of help. He had spent the past 2 years working with human relief organizations, learning their methods, adopting their philosophy. Now he was putting that knowledge to use. He worked in a hospital in the capital city, helping to coordinate the flow of patients and supplies. The work was exhausting and heartbreaking. He watched Korathi families torn apart by the plague, watched children become orphans overnight, watched strong warriors reduced to helpless victims. But he also watched something remarkable happen. Korathi citizens began to volunteer. At first it was just a few, inspired by the human example, then more and more. They helped in the hospitals, distributed food in the quarantine zones, comforted the dying. They did it without expectation of reward, without contracts or formal agreements. They did it because they saw others doing it and realized that they could too. A breakthrough came 6 months into the crisis. A joint team of human and Korathi researchers developed a treatment that could suppress the plague's worst effects. It was not a cure, but it turned a death sentence into a manageable illness. The death rate plummeted. When Representative Zeth announced the news to the Galactic Council, his voice was thick with emotion. The humans shared this research freely. They asked for no payment, no recognition, no exclusive rights. They simply gave it to us so that we could save our people. He paused, gathering himself. For my entire life, I have believed that charity was weakness, that helping strangers was irrational, that every being must look out for themselves first. The humans have proven me wrong. Their charity has shown strength beyond anything I have ever witnessed. Their irrationality has saved hundreds of millions of lives. Their refusal to look out only for themselves has demonstrated a kind of civilization that I did not know was possible. Ambassador Chen listened to his words with tears in her eyes. This was what they had hoped for when humanity first reached the stars. Not conquest, not wealth, not power. Just the chance to show other species that there was another way to exist in the universe. The crisis had cost many lives, human and Korathi alike. Thousands of human volunteers had died helping strangers from a species they had once barely known existed. Their names were recorded in memorials on both worlds, honored together as heroes of two civilizations. But out of that tragedy, something new had been born. The Korathi Empire was forever changed. A generation of young Korathi had grown up watching humans risk everything for them. They carried that lesson into adulthood, into their careers, into their own acts of kindness and courage. And they were not alone. Reports came in from across the galaxy of similar transformations. Vethani merchants establishing charitable foundations, Threxian communities organizing volunteer networks, crystalline collectives pooling resources to help those in need. Human decency, it seemed, was contagious. 10 years after the Void Plague, the galaxy had become almost unrecognizable. Vexnar stood at the window of the newly constructed Galactic Unity Center, looking out at the stars. He was older now, his carapace bearing the marks of years of hard work and travel. But his eyes still held the same curiosity that had driven him to study humans all those years ago. Behind him, the Great Hall was filling with representatives from over 100 civilizations. They had come to witness the ratification of the Galactic Mutual Aid Compact, the most ambitious interstellar agreement in history. The compact was simple in concept but revolutionary in scope. Every signatory civilization pledged to help others in times of crisis, without expectation of immediate return. Not because of contracts or obligations, but because helping others was the right thing to do. Basic decency, written into galactic law. Ambassador Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp and vital, approached him. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," Vexnar admitted. "I still cannot believe they asked me to deliver the opening address." "You earned it. Your work over the past decade has done more to spread these ideas than anything else. The schools you helped establish, the volunteer networks you organized, the bridges you built between species." She placed a wrinkled hand on his carapace. "You showed everyone that this is not just a human thing. It is a choice any species can make." "I learned from the best," he said. "No, you learned the principles from us. But what you did with them, how you adapted them, how you made them your own, That was all you. The signal came, it was time. Vexnar walked to the central platform, looking out at the assembled delegates. He saw Korathi and humans sitting side by side, Vethani and Threxians sharing quiet conversation. Even the usually isolated crystalline delegates were mingling with others, their faceted forms catching the light as they moved. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carried across the hall by translation devices in 100 different languages. "I stand before you today not as a representative of any single species, but as a citizen of the galaxy we are building together. A decade ago, I asked a question in this very council. I asked why we do not help strangers the way humans do. Today, I am proud to say that we have begun to answer that question. When I first encountered humans, I thought their behavior was irrational. They sacrificed themselves for beings they did not know. They gave without expecting return. They called risking death for strangers basic decency. To my logical mind, this made no sense. But I have learned that some things are more important than logic. Compassion is more important than logic. Connection is more important than logic. The simple act of caring for another being, regardless of species or circumstances, is more important than logic. The compact we are signing today is not a contract. It is a promise that we will be there for each other when times are hard, a promise that we will not let efficiency or self-interest prevent us from doing what is right, a promise that we will build a galaxy worthy of the beings who live in it." He paused, feeling the weight of the moment. "I want to tell you about 3 humans who died 10 years ago. Their names were Thomas Park, Diana Santos, and James Wright. They were not soldiers or leaders or diplomats. They were ordinary people who worked on a cargo ship, and when they heard that strangers were in danger, they did not hesitate. They ran into a burning station knowing they might not come out. My father was one of the people they saved. I exist because of their sacrifice. When I asked humans why their crew did this, they told me it was just basic human decency. At the time, I did not understand. Now I do. They meant that helping others is not something extraordinary. It is something fundamental. It is not what makes a being exceptional. It is what makes a being civilized. Today, we expand that definition. Today, basic decency becomes basic galactic decency. Today, we declare that every thinking being in the cosmos is worthy of our care." The applause began slowly, spreading through the chamber like a wave. Species that had been enemies for millennia stood together, united by a simple but powerful idea. Later, after the compact was signed and the celebrations began, Vexnar found a quiet balcony overlooking the stars. Ambassador Chen joined him there, moving slower than she used to but still with that same determined grace. "You know," she said, "when we first joined the galactic community, many humans were afraid. We were so young compared to everyone else, so small. We worried that we had nothing to offer, that we would be overlooked or conquered or absorbed. We never expected that our greatest gift to the galaxy would be something we took for granted, something so ordinary to us that we did not even think it was special." "It is special," Vexnar said. "It was always special. You just could not see it because it was part of who you are." She smiled. "Maybe, but what matters now is that it is part of who everyone can be. What started with a few humans running into a burning station has become this." She gestured at the lights of the Unity Center behind them, at the ships from dozens of civilizations parked in orbit above. "A galaxy that cares." "Do you think it will last?" Vexnar asked. "I think that every generation will have to choose it again. That is the nature of these things. Selfishness is easy. Compassion takes effort. But as long as there are beings willing to make that effort, willing to run toward danger when others need help, willing to sacrifice for strangers, there is hope." She looked at him with eyes that had seen much but still believed in much more. "And now there are more of us than ever, not just humans, all of us together." Vexnar thought of his father, still alive on Threx, still telling everyone about the humans who had saved him. He thought of the volunteers he had worked with over the years, human and alien alike. He thought of the young beings across the galaxy who were growing up with different expectations, different values, different definitions of what it meant to be civilized. Basic decency, he said softly. Such a simple thing, and yet it changed everything. It always does, Sarah Chin replied. It always does. Together, they stood in silence, watching the stars that had once seemed so cold and distant now burning with the warmth of a galaxy that had learned to care. Somewhere out there, new civilizations were emerging, new species taking their first steps into the void. And they would find not a universe of competition and fear, but a community waiting to welcome them. All because one small species had shown them what basic decency could mean. All because humanity had been willing to die for strangers and had called it nothing special. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.